Thank you. Maybe Jorge is the kind of guy that doesn't need a formal introduction. Everybody knows him and his long, distinguished career. But I did want to say a few words. I also wanted to welcome the folks who have joined us on the internet and on Wilson Forum TV, and we have C-SPAN Book TV here with us today as well. So we're glad that there's an expanded audience out there that will be enjoying and benefiting from this presentation. You probably have seen Jorge's bio. I won't go into detail about that, but I think the things that are most important is that he's a well-regarded, renowned scholar, thinker, writer about Mexico, policy issues. As Andrew said, this is not necessarily a policy book, but a look into the Mexican soul, maybe, if you will. I was thinking this morning that we in the United States have had Alec de Tocqueville come and kind of put the mirror up to us and show us what Americans and American democracy is all about. Jorge, I won't call you de Tocqueville, but has done a great job over the last several books trying to explain a little bit to an American audience and to Mexico, kind of the uniqueness, in this case, some of the paradoxes of the Mexican soul, the Mexican spirit, and helps us as outsiders, as foreigners, understand a place that often is confusing but beloved to so many of us. So we're privileged and honored to have you with us. What we'll do is ask Jorge to come make some remarks, initial remarks, then he'll join us again at the chair. We'll have a little bit of time for questions and dialogue with him, so I hope this is a good opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Andrew, for having me back here for the nth time, upteenth time. It's always an honor, and it's always a lot of fun. So thank you, and thank you for joining us this morning. Very briefly on the logistics of the book. I wrote this book originally in English for all sorts of reasons, but the really important reason is that it's a lot cheaper to translate from English to Spanish and the other way around. And my American publishing house didn't want to pay for the translation, whereas the Mexican one did. So that's the real reason. I can make up all sorts of other reasons, but they wouldn't be true. The second point is that, as Eric said, this book comes out simultaneously this week in the United States, in English, that's this one, in Mexico, in Spanish, that's this one, and in the United States in Spanish, that's this one. The point of this is that on a book that is such a sensitive issue, both for Mexicans in Mexico, for Mexicans in the United States, and for Americans in Mexico, and for Americans in the United States, and that's a whole lot of people all put together. I wanted to be absolutely sure that there be the slightest suspicion of having any kind of double discourse, of saying one thing in Mexico and something else in the United States. And the best way to make sure that that's the case is to have the book published at the same time, same book, same time, different places. The book is organized in a series of double chapters, odd and even, odd and even, odd and even, and then a final one. Each one of these two chapters, these four groups of two chapters, is made up of one, a so-called national character trait of the Mexican people, with as arguable as the term may be, and as upset as the anthropologists can get at me for using these sorts of terms. And then the second part of the second chapter in that subgroup is a description of a reality of current Mexico, which conflicts or contradicts violently the character trait that we have before. So there's several of these: individualism and Mexican middle-class society, a full-fledged democracy, and complete Mexican aversion for conflict and confrontation and competition, an open economy, one of the most open in the world, in a country which is scared to death of the past and the foreign, country that needs more than anything else to complete its full consummation to democratic rule, to establish the rule of law, and a character trait which is perhaps the most deeply rooted of all, that is a total reluctance or rejection of the very notion of the rule of law. And so basically what I say in these 8 chapters is that something has to give. And I'll just choose one couple of chapters to perhaps try and explain what I mean. In the 3rd chapter, I go deeply into this notion of conflict aversion. Why we don't like confrontation. We don't like verbal confrontation. We don't like physical confrontation. We don't like conceptual confrontation. We don't like competition. We just don't like that sort of stuff. And this makes it very difficult to coexist with a democracy where the whole point of that is that you have conflicting ideas, conflicting parties, conflicting schools of thought, as Mao would have said, 100 schools of thought, let 100 flowers bloom. Well, in Mexico they bloom, but they don't contend. We have a lot of flowers, we have very few schools of thought. And this makes it all very difficult for that democracy to work. Examples. I don't start, but I include one of them, which is one of the most peculiar features of current-day Mexico. We are, as the New York Times put it a couple of years ago, the only country in the world that is really obsessed with the Guinness Book of World Records. But, I mean, really obsessed, not just fooling around, really obsessed. And we are the only country that spends significant amounts of money, of public money, on financing the largest tamal in the world, the largest rosca de reyes, obviously the longest taco, but also the highest artificial Christmas tree and the world's largest ice skating rink. Now, you know, Mexico City is not the first place that would come to mind to have a big ice skating rink, among other reasons because nothing ever freezes there. But this is what we did last year, and we made it to the Guinness Book of Records. So you ask yourself, and a Mexican sociologist, Carlos Elizondo, asked this question a couple of years ago, why in the world do we do this? And Elizondo came up with a very intelligent answer. Because this is the kind of competition we like. We're the only ones competing. You can't lose if you're in the competition for the world's biggest taco, because nobody else is doing it. Nobody else is crazy enough to do this nonsense and spend time or money on it. It's not going to happen. And so we love that kind of competition. The problem, of course, is that aversion to competition, when it extends into antitrust policy, when it extends into the type of monopolies we have, when it extends into the type of concentration of power we have, then it gets complicated. Then things don't work anymore. And so I go into the same stories with a little vignette about Carlos Slim, which I think is both respectful but also somewhat critical, not of his personality or persona, but of his situation, which also has to do with another trait that I described, the individualism. It has not often been said that not only does Slim concentrate in net worth around 7% of Mexican GDP, which would be roughly 3 times what John D. Rockefeller concentrated in 1911 on the eve of the breakup of Standard Oil, in other words, 3 times more. But more interestingly, Slim's net worth is greater than the net worth of the following 20 Mexican magnates, or fat cats. It's as if, let's say, Gates had more money than Buffett and the Waltons and the next 15 altogether, which is obviously not the case. The concentration is such that it's almost unfathomable, which is why we always say, and rightly so, the Mexican business community is made out of 2 parts. Slim and the rest.